Bernie Sanders supporter Susan Sarandon was on the news last night talking about why she supports Bernie Sanders, but also what would happen if it ends up being Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. Chris Hayes wants to know, would she support Hillary in that situation? And her response is getting her a lot of criticism.
Isn't the question always in an election about choices, right? I mean, I think a lot of people think to themselves, well, if it's Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton.
I think a lot of people are sorry. I just can't bring myself to do that.
How about you personally?
I don't know. I'm going to see what happens.
Really?
Really.
I cannot believe that as you're watching the ride,
well, you know,
Donald
some
Trump
people feel Donald Trump will bring the revolution immediately. If he gets in, then things will really, you know.
Oh, you're saying the Leninist model of heighten the contradictions?
Yeah. Some people feel that.
Don't you think that's dangerous?
I think that what's going on now, if you think that it's pragmatic to shore up the status quo right now, then you're not in touch with the status quo.
So, a lot of people saying, well, God, how stupid must she be to say that Donald Trump would actually be better than Hillary Clinton? Now, look, overall, do I largely agree with her point? No, I don't. I do think, though, he was trying to get her to go to the most extreme version of what a lot of people are feeling that is much more justifiable, and that's why he doesn't focus on that part. The idea that, well, look, obviously Donald Trump is awful, but why, when the primary is not over, are we being forced to constantly say what we would do about Hillary Clinton? Like, why is that always the topic of conversation when Bernie Sanders has just won 6 out of the last 7 primaries?
Great point. That's a great point. They've already decided, the mainstream media at least, has already decided that it's a race between Hillary and Trump. In fact, they decided that a while ago. And it doesn't matter what Bernie does. It doesn't matter how successful he's been in, you know, the primaries as of late. It doesn't matter how many young voters support him and how much excitement there is around his campaign. The media has already decided these are our front runners, so let's just wrap it up and call it a day.
Yeah.
So this conversation is premature, to say the least. With that said, it's still an interesting conversation. And although I'm not sure I agree with Susan Sarandon on her answer, I think that she provides a perspective that a lot of people identify with, a lot of Bernie supporters identify with. Look, I don't know where I stand. A few months ago, I published this article about how I won't vote for Hillary. But the thing is, it's a little bit of an example of me cheating because I live in California. It doesn't matter who I vote for. California is going to vote for the Democratic frontrunner. With that said, symbolically, I'm not going to vote if Hillary gets the nomination. But in states where it's much more crucial for people to vote for the Democratic candidate, I don't know what kind of advice I would give them. I'm torn. I see her point, but I think she's giving the American people too much credit in saying that it would start a revolution if Trump got elected. There are a lot of terrible things that have happened in this country over the last decade. Things that should have started a revolution, and they did not.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the idea that something crazy will happen if Trump becomes president, she might even be right, but it might not be the crazy thing that she thinks will happen.
Yeah.
And I have no interest in rolling the dice on that. I don't know. I'm not that kind of gambler. Maybe Ben Mankiewicz. I don't know. But I'm not going to try that.
I know.
He doesn't support that actual idea. He just loves gambling. No. So I don't support that at all. And I want to go back to the point that I saw somebody who I follow on social media was like, well, like the idea that taking money from big banks is worse somehow than supporting waterboarding. Oh, well, that's a good point. But I would say that it's also not as good as someone who doesn't support waterboarding and doesn't take money from the big banks. And thankfully, we have somebody who's doing quite well in the primary right now with those two positions.
I mean, the thing that frustrates me the most about the Democratic Party as a whole, all these Democratic voters, is their defeatist attitude. I know I've talked about this on the show quite a bit, but I want to reiterate how frustrating it is that people have already given up. They've already decided, like, oh, Hillary has a better shot. We're just going to vote for Hillary, and who cares what Bernie's message is? No, first of all, there's a primary process for a reason.
Yeah.
And during this process, the reason why we have a billion debates and stay here late several nights a week is because we want to know what their policy ideas are and why they're different from one another.
Yeah.
But people don't care about policy ideas. I feel like I'm the weirdo in the room who wants to know exactly what they're proposing, how they're going to get it done, how they're different from one another. I mean, you have Hillary's camp talking about, oh my God, Bernie Sanders, he needs to change the tone of his campaign. Why? Because he's calling you out when it comes to the people that are funding your campaign, the people that are paying you six figures for your speeches, the fact that you haven't released those transcripts yet. Is that the tone that you're worried about? Well, these are the things that we should know during the primary process, and we are learning about them, but you still have these defeatists that are like, no, I don't know, I think Hillary's going to probably do it better. No, Hillary is not polling well against Trump. If Hillary can't handle Bernie's tone, imagine how she's going to deal with Trump debating her in the general election. Stop giving up so easily. You have two options on the Democratic side right now. One is better than the other. Please do your research. Stop being an idiot.
Exactly. Exactly. And look, I think that months from now, theoretically, if Hillary is the nominee, I agree with an analysis I saw, I think, on Vox. I think in the end, a significant chunk of the people who now say Bernie or bust will probably end up voting for Hillary Clinton.
Right.
Because Donald Trump is an absolute disaster.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that right now you should be lambasted in the media or implied that you're a moron because you're still pushing for Bernie. And a lot of people who are committed liberals and especially hate when women are disrespected for their political opinions are enthusiastically throwing Susan Sarandon into the fire because she is still a supporter of Bernie Sanders. And by the way, in the past, in 2000, she supported Ralph Nader. In 2008, she supported Barack Obama. This is a consistent position from her that she thinks that the Democratic Party and the left needs to change, and it needs someone who can change it. Now, we were misled by Barack Obama about the extent to which he would change the party, but she is sticking to that. This is not some ridiculous, weird notion in her head. And I love, by the way, that she's coming out to support him. Sarah Silverman had an amazing video on Facebook and YouTube supporting him. And look, in every election, there's going to be a split up of who the celebrities support. On Hillary's side, she's got like George Clooney hosting $350,000 fundraisers for her. I support the people who try to actually convince you with their words rather than just with millions of dollars, but maybe that's just me.